welcome to my formalized rant about radiation, aka my TED Talk. Currently, my thesis is incomplete. It lies in the nebulous void between my own mind, a Google Doc, and John Oliver's COVID void. So this is going to be a little interesting. So let's start off with some show and tell. Okay, so here I have some cat litter. Here I have a banana. Here I have a sample of uranium. Here I have a smoke alarm, smoke detector. Here I have a plate. Here I have an email to Kyle of a lungfish. There we go, I just sent it. And here I have the best song playing on a Bluetooth speaker of all time.
Talk you radio fever.
You don't dance up there.
Fever spreading all around. With a Geiger counter in my hand.
I'm going up to take me some gun left land.
Uranium fever has done and got me down.
Okay. Out of all of these objects, which ones are and are not radioactive? Or emit radiation? As you can guess, they all do. Yeah. Feel fear. Because radiation is everywhere. It is inescapable. Unless you have lead, that is. Or sometimes tape, or sometimes tinfoil, sometimes paper, sometimes sunscreen, I guess. Sometimes it's everywhere and it's fine, and sometimes, oh, you've been exposed and you have 5 days to live. Sorry. It's complicated, because radiation is a very complicated part, and I can smell it. It smells real good. Oh dear. Oops. I didn't mean to. Sorry. Yeah, it's everywhere. It's pretty hard to escape. So how did we not know about it for so long? Well, let's see when we discovered it. Radiation was discovered by two people. Wilhelm Röntgen, a German guy who found X-rays in 1895, and Antoine Henri Becquerel, a stupid French man. He found uranium emitted energy a few months after Röntgen. So these were the two people who kind of found these things, but they didn't really know what they did. Who figured them out was Marie Curie, the coolest scientist ever. I'll fight you if you disagree with me. So she actually named radiation. She made the term radiation, and she also figured out what was happening, which kind of changed everything about how we think of atoms, because how we thought of them before is like, they can't change. This is the building block. Nothing else can change. But then she found out, like, hey, intrinsically, on their own, they can decide, they will throw off energy, they can transmutate to different elements, they can decay. She discovered that, which changed the whole realm of science, which is pretty crazy. And she also discovered two elements, polonium, which she couldn't do much with, and radium, which glowed. And as she got a Nobel Prize for this work, she got pretty famous from it because she was a woman, she got a Nobel Prize, she's this cool science lady. So we had the radiation craze and stuff. And what happened there is we did a lot of dumb, fun stuff. We would drink radium in water because it was glowy and we thought it was good for you. We had it as medicine because it was good for you because, hey, we can use it to burn skin to treat cancer, so it can treat anything. And we just put it in things. We also used it for lights. We also used X-rays to tell if our shoe size, because the only way to tell if your shoe can fit is if you put it in an X-ray machine. There's no other way to know if a shoe will fit. That is true. So people got hurt from this because, well, if not handled properly, radiation can hurt you. This is if you have radium. Radium looks like calcium to the body, so the body puts it in, and it starts to rot because it's still killing cells in the body, and people got hurt. The radium girls are one good case where they didn't really know what they were handling and they weren't told it was dangerous. So they all died. So a lot of them died from it. Marie Curie herself died because she was the first scientist working with it. So she wasn't protecting herself. And so you think, oh, radiation's bad, it's dangerous, we stopped doing this. Well, no, because very early on we knew that radiation could hurt you. See this little guy right here? I love this guy. This was a suit for radiation protection in 1913. In fact, really in the early 1900s, we already knew radiation was dangerous. X-ray shoe fittings were made in the early 1930s to 1950s. The timeline doesn't really add up. When you think about why did we stop if we knew it was dangerous, scientists would make things illegal. We would use hair, because we used to use X-ray hair removal, that's one example. It was illegal, but people were still like, I don't want chin hairs, those are ugly, so they would do it illegally. And one time, cops broke down an X-ray hair clinic, and they thought it was an abortion clinic, because that is an illegal abortion clinic, because that is the level of sneakiness you had to have and being like sketchiness that you had to have if you wanted to go get extra hair removal. It was illegal, and people knew it was dangerous, and they still did it. So why? Because if we have the science to know it was bad for you really early on, like 1909, we already had like cases of this. We had a lot of cases really early on, actually. What? If they knew the science, why didn't they care? Let's talk about the science real quick. Yay! I had to learn it, you will have to too. Okay, so radiation, what is it? As Oxford Dictionary defines, radiation is the emission of energy as electromagnetic waves or as moving subatomic particles, especially high energy particles which cause ionization. Okay, so let's start off with like, radiation has two kind of there's two types. So you have particulate and you have electromagnetic. So particulate, those are particles, electromagnetic, those are like photons and energy going off of it. So let's start with particulate. So first off, we have alpha decay. So alpha decay, what happens there is because what's all happening in all these is the atom's unstable, and so it tries to throw something off to be more stable. In the case of alpha decay, it throws off a mini nucleus basically, because they throw off just hydrogen atom, because they throw off 2 neutrons, 2 protons, and they throw that off. That's why they're really heavy. That's why they can be blocked easy, like something from on the paper, because they're super heavy, so they have a hard time penetrating things, but they do a lot of damage if they do, which is still why they're dangerous. But they're just not as long reaching. They can't go as far. They're not as strong. Then you have beta decay, and beta decay is very similar, except what's happening here is that it changes a neutron to a proton or a proton to a neutron to change what the element is or its isotope to try to stabilize. That's what decay chains are. It's just changing and changing. Then the daughter does something, the daughter does something until it's done. And so it'll throw off either an electron or a proton, a positron, which either way that's kind of the beta, that's like what the beta radiation cell is, kind of cell thing. I don't know what a cell, it's not a cell, but thing is. And those can penetrate more. That's why you need something like tinfoil, because they're more penetrative, but they can still be blocked better because they're lighter and stuff. And then finally we have electromagnetic, which this is why radiation can be very safe to be with, because if you go from things like radio waves, microwaves, those are really big. They're like bigger than you think they are, and they're not ionizing. So they don't pass through the body and hurt cells. What does hurt cells when they pass through the body is all of the particulate types and really high energy ones, like when we get around here, when we get to the part of where around the sun is, past visible light to where the sun is, to gamma rays and X-rays and all of this. Those are all particles. It's all just energy. So that's why we can just make it if we want to. That's what X-rays we can just generate, really. But because they're really high energy and they're smaller and they're moving really fast, and they will knock out electrons in the cell in the atom, and that in the body is really bad because it kills cells. It destroys the cell's ability to reproduce, to make more cells, or it damages part of the cell's DNA in a way where it either makes cancer or it can mutate, though the risks are lower than you think they'd be. So yeah, that's really the science of it. So then what changed? And as you can guess, a good changing point in the history of radiation would be the atomic bomb. I got this hat from my dad. So because Oppenheimer didn't come out until last year, the public didn't know what was going on at the time. So they didn't know the US was making nukes at the time. That was a bad joke. They didn't know they were making bombs at the time. So the first announcement to the world that the US and a successful atomic bomb was made was Hiroshima. And then Nagasaki, but Hiroshima, that's when they were announcing it. And then they just did it again because, Russia probably, the main reason, though they had their stuff. They had my themes. Yeah, so that's just where we got that big first fear of radiation, but it wasn't as big as you think it would be because it ended the war in everyone's minds because, oh, my son, my brother, I myself, I don't have to go to war anymore. It's over. It's like this was the end of the war. And the first guilt people started feeling was a year later when the story of the survivors came out, the stories of the bombs and the horrific things that happened to them came out. But even then, it wasn't as big of a fear. And then those stupid commies got the bomb. And so everyone freaked out because now 2 countries who are at war both have the bomb. They're not at war. They haven't struck each other yet, but now they both have it. And so as a smart decision that's always a good idea, the US escalated. Meaning they were like, all right, we weren't going to do it now, but now we're going to make the hydrogen bomb because it's bigger and we're going to destroy Russia. So they did that. And they did ID Mike, which went fine. And then they did Castle Bravo. And Castle Bravo was a lot more powerful than they thought it would be. And so they're testing this in Bikini Atoll. So they set up a safety range. They set up like, this is a danger zone, don't come in here. It was more powerful than they thought it would be. So that danger zone became bigger. And a ship called the Lucky Dragon, which is pretty ironic, a ship got stuck in there for 6 hours because they were a fishing vessel, so they couldn't pull out. And radioactive particles and ash was falling on them from the fallout for 6 hours. And when they got back, they were sick and they were hospitalized for over a year. One of them died during that time. And so the world, hearing this story, because the whole world heard about the story, wanted to know what the US was doing. The world wanted to know, hey, why did this happen? Like, what are you actually doing? Because the US, no one's being open about it. And the US was like, fine, we'll tell you, fine. And so they did. They released a previously internal film, and they released this section. Well, most of it's pretty procedural, and they released this section. Every other time I've loaded this, they haven't shown an ad. I'm going to die. I don't care about this.
On the remote. Remote.
Oh, what is going on?
Behind the computer.
I'm sorry, I tested
No,
this
you're
so
good.
much, and it's not working this time.
You're okay.
I'm so embarrassed.
It's breathe. You're good.
Breathe.
This is not the first tech issue we've had in presentations.
I know, but it was so smooth every other time.
It's okay.
Where's the volume?
See the remote behind the computer?
No.
Right behind the computer. There you go.
Oh,
There's a volume on there. Turn it up on there.
okay.
Yep.
In the last seconds.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1, T0.
This is the largest fireball ever produced. At its maximum, it measures about 3 1/4 miles in diameter. Compared to the skyline of New York, this means that with the Empire State Building as 0 point, the Mike Fireball would extend downtown to Washington Square and uptown to Central Park. In other words, the fireball alone would engulf about 1/4 of the island of Manhattan.
Yeah, and that did not calm anyone's fears about nuclears, because it went from this thing that we had an idea of and we'd seen pictures of the destruction, but we've also seen pictures of destruction of us bombing places with conventional bombs, so it wasn't big. And then you have this, and you have them telling you exactly how big it was and how much it could do about an area of its own citizens, which was also a good choice. We could destroy Manhattan if we felt like it. It is a terrifying thought, and it made a lot of things more real for the public, so there's a lot more nuclear fear, and that's kind of where a lot of the bigger nuclear fear started. But then, I haven't talked about the fear, though, of specifically nuclear power, because that's a different type of fear. That's newer. Why does it let me move?
It gets weird with YouTube videos. Sometimes. There you go.
Yeah, so that brings us to why we have our fears of nuclear power. So, Pierce, you cannot answer this. So when was the first nuclear meltdown? Well, as you might guess, obviously, Ontario, Canada, 1952. Something none of you have heard of because no one got hurt and no one talked about it, so it didn't matter in the grand scheme of things. No one got hurt, no one mattered. We've had them before. This wasn't even a power plant. This was a test of them before we started building power plants. So, it wasn't that bad. But what was bad, or we consider really bad, was 3 Mile Island, Chernobyl, and Fukushima. So let's talk about all of them real quick. So, how many people died at 3 Mile Island? 0. How many people were injured at 3 Mile Island? 0. What were the environmental impacts of 3 Mile Island? None. 3 Mile Island was heavily dramatized in the media, and people freaked out a lot, but in reality, they fixed the problem very quickly, and they contained it very well. And the other plant, as you can see here, this one was the one that shut down. This one kept running until 2018, because the other one was fine. It was just this problem with this plant, that there's a small problem with the valve. But at the time, what was happening is you had news reporters saying things like, the entire eastern seaboard will be wiped out if this thing melts down, which is not how anything works, and we don't have a bomb capable of wiping out the entire eastern seaboard, so we don't have a nuclear reactor that could do that either. But that's what they were told, and that's why people think 3 Mile Island was really bad and people are traumatized from it because of the fear around it, but not from what actually happened. Then we have Chernobyl, which was actually pretty bad, but that's also because the Russians had really bad scientists and designed a really, really bad plant. And because when it goes wrong, what goes wrong is the whole thing speeds up when it goes wrong. Like, that's part of their system because they had a really bad system, and Stalin was really only put people in power and scientists he trusted, and he was paranoid, so he trusted weird people because he was a paranoid man. And Chernobyl, we had 30 deaths, and actually even the actual evacuation was bigger than need be because they were over paranoid, being over cautious, which is fair. And then we have Fukushima. How many people died of Fukushima? 1. So well, one died 5 years later. Like 5 years after the accident, we have 1 death attributed to it. And do you know how many deaths? And then, so that's not a lot of deaths from the biggest accidents we've had. What is like 1 coal power? And in Japan, let's go to another example. In Japan, there was 1 explosion at a coal power plant. Do you know how many people died then? Over 1,000. And so, which brings me to the next point. Nuclear is stupid safe. This is the amount of deaths per accidents and air pollution of electricity we generate. Here is nuclear right above solar, which for solar, one of the biggest ways you can die of it is if you fall off a roof. Nice. So it's pretty safe compared to all these things, but we don't use it a lot. I mean, and let's look at the environmental impacts. Nuclear doesn't release a lot of greenhouse gas emissions. It's very clean, but instead we use this for most. We use coal, we use oil and natural gas for most of our energy, and only 4% of it's nuclear, even though nuclear is way cleaner. And so, but hey, I mean, we have cleaner options. Nuclear is not renewable, so let's talk about our clean options. Our clean options are great. It's great that we want to move towards these, but they still need a lot of work. They're not working at the time. First, let's like dams. They generate a lot of power. They are terrible for the environment. They disrupt where fish are going. They disrupt natural land. They disrupt where the silt's going. So it kills the rivers. It's terrible. Let's talk about wind. Wind needs a lot of area. It actually can be pretty dangerous to set up, and it messes with animals' navigation, like the Sami people who have been affected by it. And solar doesn't work everywhere. These are great options, but at the moment they're not perfect. We need to use stuff that we have now, and nuclear is actually our best option right now. It's considered more dangerous because of fear, but it's actually super safe, and at the moment, until we have better options, we really need to be switching to more of it. So are we smarter than the people of the past? Maybe, but because they were drinking radium when they thought they shouldn't be, but at the same time, we're killing our planet with fossil fuels and greenhouse emissions when we have an option right here that we could switch to very efficiently as a stopgap until we can do better things. So I think we all need to remember that nothing in life is to be feared, and that we just need to understand it, because when you understand how nuclear power works, when you understand how radiation works, it's just a part of life. It's safe, and we don't need to fear it, because we should really be fearing the giant coal power plants that emit right next to schools, not the nuclear power plants that once in like 10 years have accidents. So, any questions?